What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. In the recent weeks, one of the most unexpected things in the Russian media happened. The country's state media censor, Roskomnadzor, placed its attention on a surprisingly new target: pro-war bloggers and Z-Propagandists. This shift in focus signals a deeper attention within Russia's delicate media landscape, a space dominated by state control, but increasingly challenged by independent voices, both pro and anti-government. The emergence of new legislation which seeks to register social media bloggers who have more than 10,000 followers has sparked fierce reactions from those who once considered themselves firm allies of the Kremlin's agenda. Today, let's talk about how Russia's information autocracy has evolved, the challenges it faces in controlling new forms of media, and the paradox it now confronts in silencing its own supporters. From its earliest days, Vladimir Putin's presidency has been marked by an obsession with controlling the media. In May 2000, only days after Putin was sworn into office, the government raided the headquarters of Media Most, a company owned by Vladimir Gusinsky, which controlled major outlets such as NTV and Echo of Moscow. While many other instruments of autocratic rule were yet to be put in place, the attack on the media was immediate. Putin's rise to power was largely facilitated by the media itself. A figure virtually unknown to the public the year before, Putin was catapulted into the presidency in 2000s, largely due to his visibility on television. The only thing known about his days of youth is that he was working in the FSB, modern KGB. He was sent to the Eastern Germany as a spy, where he was not able to achieve much success. Putin always tried to be as close to power as possible and always switched sides when convenient, trying to be on the winning side. There was not much loyalty from Putin to his superiors, he did not listen much to them and often took the initiative by himself, doing some borderline shady things. His true rise to power happened when he worked closely with one of the ex-mayors of St. Petersburg, Anatoly Sobchak. But when he lost in the re-elections, Putin waved him goodbye and left. Since then, he was often seen closely related to the criminal world of St. Petersburg. He took part in the establishment of some oligarchs and he personally saw the destruction of organized crime groups which were not suitable to his liking. As you can see, nothing in the early biography of Putin screams about him about being a government employee. He never held an office, he was never a mayor, a deputy, not even a small regional policymaker, and suddenly such person takes the highest office in the biggest country of the world and holds this position almost a quarter century later. How was he able to do it? If you're looking for a one-word answer, that's going to be propaganda. Since his early days, Putin saw the power of TV and media in general. He saw how daily narrative can change the mindsets of millions. And if somebody disagrees at first, it will take some time to brainwash this person, but it can be done. It will take longer in some cases though, but most importantly, it can be done no matter what. Putin also witnessed early enough how much the threat of an external enemy unites people. Whether these are Chechens, NATO, America, the West itself, or even Ukraine. And since then, his entire presidency, if you can call it like that, was built around this approach. Govern without being interrupted for as long as you can, and then when society starts to show signs of unrest, just find an enemy from the outside, reset patriotic feelings and support of your people, defeat the enemy, and then govern without being interrupted for as long as you can. Sounds absurd that it can work for 24 years. Have people not yet noticed the tendency that they live in a never-ending circle of repeated events? And yet, somehow it still works. Over time, the state's influence over legacy media became absolute. Major TV networks, once seen as independent, fell in line with the government's narrative. The 2004 Beslan school siege was a turning point when news outlets began to report not based on their own journalism, but on memos from the presidential office. By this time, Russia had developed a media system in which a few major outlets could be easily controlled through their owners or through advertising, which was tightly regulated by the government. Legacy media, limited in number and resources, became a tool of the state, ensuring that the message approved by the Kremlin is heard loud and clear. However, while this strategy worked well with traditional media, it was not equipped to handle the digital revolution that followed. As the internet became more widely accessible, a new media landscape emerged, one that the Kremlin found much harder to control. With the rapid rise of social media and blogging platforms in the 2010s, the Kremlin's control over information began to show cracks. As protests happened across Russia in 2012, led by those opposed to the increasingly autocratic regime, it became clear that the digital sphere was not as easily controlled as television or newspapers. Unlike the tightly controlled legacy media, digital platforms allowed anyone with an internet connection to spread and consume information. Whether a person has a following of 10 people, 10,000 or even 10 million people, every single one of them created their online presence in just a matter of minutes. By the time I finish saying this sentence, several more Russian people will create their social media accounts, and not a single one of them will be restricted to the type of content they want to see and they want to post. A new generation of bloggers and influencers emerged, speaking directly to their audiences without the filters of state-controlled networks. So, how does Kremlin control this massive surge in population activity? Well, that's a very good question. This was a significant departure from the old world. The state could not rely on the same methods of intimidation or control that worked so well with television stations or print media. Bloggers, often anonymous or semi-anonymous, were not part of major corporations. They did not rely on advertising revenue from large companies, and they could not be easily summoned to government offices for weekly briefings. The sheer number of voices online meant that the government was dealing with a far more decentralized and unpredictable media ecosystem. In response, the Kremlin began to explore new methods to bring digital media under control. One of the earliest attempts came in 2014, with a law that required bloggers with a viewership of over 3,000 people per day to register with the very same Roskomnadzor, effectively treating them as media outlets subject to the same restrictions as television and newspapers. The law, however, was a complete failure. Its vague wording and the impracticality of tracking so many online personalities led to confusion even within the government itself. Hundreds of thousands of Russians can reach these numbers quite easily. So, how do you build such a database to hold them all and update regularly their analytics? And most importantly, how do you track each and every single one of them? What do they write and what do they say? Pretty impossible, even for the notorious Russian apparatus. By 2017, logically, the law had been quietly killed, but the state's desire to control the internet remained the same, if not much more. Now, nearly a decade later, the Kremlin is once again attempting to register and control online voices. The new legislation, which focuses on bloggers with more than 10,000 followers, reflects the government's ongoing struggle to adapt its old methods of control to the new media. While the previous law targeted anyone who can easily get 3,000 daily views, the current one appears to focus surprisingly on pro-war bloggers, both pro and anti-government. This new group has grown significantly in influence since the start of the conflict with Ukraine, and a lot of Russians, mostly of younger generation, prefer to receive their daily updates from such people. Ironically, many of these bloggers are big supporters of the Kremlin's military actions, more commonly known as Z-Propagandists, Z-bloggers, or the Telegram channels. And while some of them are paid from the Russian budget to spread its narrative, some of them have taken it upon themselves to promote government ideas without the need for state funding or directions. Yet, despite their loyalty to the cause, the government seems determined to bring them under the same control as any other media outlet. This has caused significant backlash among the very people who have been the regime's loudest cheerleaders. Many pro-war bloggers see the new law as not only unnecessary but also dangerous. They argue that by forcing them to register, the government is making them vulnerable to Ukraine's intelligence services, which could potentially use the bloggers' personal information against them. They fear that once Roskomnadzor collects their data, it will inevitably end up in the wrong hands. The line that was once seen as a distinction between government loyalists and critics has now been blurred, with both sides increasingly skeptical of the state's overreach into their personal freedoms. Well, surprise, surprise, Z-Propagandists, right? Why would Kremlin even do that? Is it so paranoid about anyone spreading fake news, or even worse, spreading the truth? Z-propagandists themselves earn some sort of reputation among their audiences that sometimes they can speak against the government and its actions, especially if some offensives costs way too many lives or if the Z army does a gesture of goodwill. While state propaganda can justify both of these things and make it look like it is actually something good, the Z bloggers can say whatever they want and accidentally spill the truth or even blame the government for its mistakes, which is completely unacceptable according to the Putin's regime logic. But once again, how do you control tens and hundreds of thousands individual minds? It is much easier to influence these minds, but controlling them, that's a whole new story. And for the state, which is so obsessed about the purity of its propaganda, this task is physically impossible. The Kremlin now finds itself in an unusual situation. It has spent decades building a media system that suppresses dissent and ensures that only government-approved narratives reach the public. Yet, in its zeal to control every aspect of the informational landscape, it has alienated even the most adamant supporters. The pro-war bloggers, while mostly repeating the government's views, have nonetheless become too independent for the Kremlin's liking. Unlike traditional media outlets, they cannot be forced into a single room and given orders about what to say, what to do, and what to show. And so this paradox, needing their voices to promote the war effort while simultaneously trying to control them, has exposed a deep contradiction within the government strategy. The state thrives on propaganda, and it also thrives on control. But true propaganda requires freedom, even if it is limited, to inspire and to motivate. In an attempt to silence them or force them to comply, the government risks killing the very passion and enthusiasm that makes these bloggers effective. The attempt to control them creates even bigger problems for the Kremlin, as it tries to maintain an iron grip on a society that increasingly demands freedom, even within the borders of an autocratic regime. Well, there I have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like this video, subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below, PayPal donations, Patreon subscriptions for bonus content, and there's also the Russian Dude merch. The links are down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.